hello and welcome to the Big Bot Bash of 2025. Was I invited? No, but am I gonna make a bot?
You're goddamn right.
Now, as our relationship from here on out will be transactional by nature, it is in the interest of brevity and transparency, I feel it my duty to inform you that there will be zero kit bashing today. There will, however, be the internet's first junk bot generated Wolverine murder bot. And if Wolverine murder bot tickled your giblets in just the right way, then welcome. You are amongst friends. So the way that this works is that Bill has kindly created a bot generator or randomizer. There's 6 categories from head to the feet with 20 attributes each. For each category, you roll a d20. This style was created exclusively to extend young men's years on this planet as thirsty virgins. But if for any reason you don't have one, don't worry. Probably means that you like the outdoors and can use an internet-based die. And it is important to note that a sketchbook is a sketchbook. It is not a drawing book. It is just a place for you to get your thoughts and spit them out on a page, like so.
No.
The armature that I'll be using for this particular build is actually a leftover from a snake that I made in a previous video. But so far as my unbashed bot goes, for the body I rolled spikes, for the head I rolled mandibles, the arms, extras, hands are hard because of course I did, and for the legs I got weak. Finally I got the flavor as killing machine. So here are the broad strokes. The idea is that this bot has got 4 arms, fulfilling the extra arms aspects of the brief. His poor legs, being determined as weak, were sadly expedited from his body in battle. This would usually send our intrepid battle bots to the ash heap of histories, but our bull-headed pilot and by proxy the bot continue to battle while using the larger arms as limbs upon which to walk. So yes, we're rolling out arm legs with finger toes. With the start of the body sufficiently bulked, we're going to move on and dive into the greeblies. And greeblies are essentially bits and bobs and random doodads that serve absolutely no visible purpose or function and are merely jewellery set in place to overwhelm your senses. That said, I am hyper aware that I will be making body armour and pistons which are highly functional, so yeah, bear with. The pistons themselves are pretty simple. You just put a small dowel in a big dowel and then you can move on to the foot fingers. And said foot fingers start off as a flat piece of clay rolled out on my pasta maker that I can cut into strips. And if my math is mathing, each finger has 4 plates, 5 fingers per hand equals 20 plates. 20 multiplied by 2 is 40, right? No, apparently it's more like 60. So needless to say, I had some spares. But they did not go to waste, I assure you. Stay tuned. And in an effort to maintain my mediocre status on YouTube, all these plates will be cut via the tried and true method of eyeballing it. And it worked out just fine. I added the rivets by way of a 0.7 mechanical pencil with the graphite removed and then baked them before assembly. And here I'm using my recently acquired circular cutter to cut out some elbow knees, and with the top of a mechanical pencil I can mark in the little details, and then I will come back with the mechanical pencil and give them all the rivet treatment. I can then scrape them off the base, add them to the claws and the fingers, and everybody can go in the oven for a nice bake. With the oven doing its thing, we can now move on to the stomach-centered industrial shredder. You see, my thinking for the flavor, which was killing machine, is that our Weapon X by design grabs his giant alien invading foe with his arms that are now legs, and while they're in a vice grip, he does a murder with the claws and finally processes the corpse of his fallen enemy via industrial belly shredder, and the remains of said fallen foe are ejected, albeit tastefully, at the future back exhausts. But I'm fine. Really? Are those sirens? I'll then make a small housing box for the blades, glue it all together and sand accordingly. Insert it into Weapon X's torso before making a shoulder cannon.
What did you say?
Shoulder cannon.
Good.
Much like our pistons, we put a small stick in a bigger stick. We can form the main body of the cannon. I don't know what it's called. Maybe an American can help me out in the comments section. But I pretty much cut out a shape that I like. I impress in the barrel profile and I bake it. I then make a little shoulder mount also, in the same way that I made the elbow knees. I bake these and I glue them together and then I glue them to the cannon. And here we can admire a nice little cannon profile. I then base the top with a little bit of bacon bond and I add a sleeve for a little bit of depth. And finally, with an X-Acto blade and a metal shaper, I'll shape the top and we have ourselves a nice, completely practical shoulder cannon that is 12 meters long, or approximately 42 standard issue footballs from my American viewers. I know how y'all feel about the metric system.
As tall as an emperor penguin and with the poundage of a newborn horse.
We can then turn our attention to the forearm shin guards. I made a rough template off screen which I'll use to cut out 2 equal guards. I can use the edge of the Black Falcon to carve in some plate rim edge detail before whipping out my recently acquired circle cutters and adding in the castellations to the guards, which I can only assume were introduced to the bot's design to reduce the weight of the guard whilst maintaining structural integrity. To make the back exhaust, I'll wrap some clay around 2 different size metal cutters and cut to size. I'll be making 4 in total and pop these into the oven with the castellated guards. With a little bit of fiddling, I free the cutter from its clay tomb and back again to sanding. Here I tried to force hollow baked clay into unbaked clay and cracked an exhaust, which honestly, it's fine. This is a 13-meter tall warbot of the future. If he's not messed up, he's doing something wrong. But that said, I do carve out some ports within which I can dock the exhausts, so they fit quite nicely and I can make the piston holes by pressing them into the clay and get cracking on his feet. To get the ball rolling, I add a ball to the wrist ankle and supply our bot with 5 fingers. It did, however, look a wee bit crowded, so I opted to lose a finger toe. And as I am nothing if not original, I add a circular MacGuffin to the center of the chest, much like Gypsy Danger, Iron Giant, the X-Men Sentinels, the Hulkbuster, C-3PO, and every Iron Man suit that ever was. I can then take 5 minutes to shave my chest before getting back to work and shaving Weapon X's chest with an X-Acto blade. For the arm leg assembly, I'll add the wrist ankle, the forearm shin guard, the shoulder hip cap, followed by the elbow knee, an Ed 209 inspired piston, and finally the finger toes. And that is our lower limb construction. I'll do the same with the other arm leg off camera, because anybody who's ever made a video before knows that editing down 20 hours of footage to 20 minutes is just the worst. Second only to going in for a handshake when they go in for a hug.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine, and you're not really fine. You just can't get into it because they would never understand.
I'll then add a medley of other greeblies we have made on our journey and start adding some detail to the back. I add connection rims to the exhaust and some plates to the top of the body and around the chest. And with seemingly no coherent thought given, I will add random plates all over the body with rivets just to make it look busy. His banana hammock can receive some detail pressed into the clay with a steel ruler, and I'll also add a couple of random plates to the top. I can add some treads to the footwear then, and the treads receive an adequate amount of treads followed by the requisite mechanical pencil rivets. And I'll make this little back detail to go between the exhausts. I decide that I hate it and proceed to rip it off as it looks like cheap hockey pads. I'll replace it with a far more appropriate extract venting cowl and a series of smaller square sections that will house our body spikes. The idea I had with the body spikes will require us to use our imagination ever so slightly. But don't be scared, I'll walk you through it. Take my hand. My idea was that the spikes are housed within the body of the bot, and are spring-loaded retractable murder spears for when the enemies get too close and maybe crawling on the body. To achieve this, I press in a hole larger than the future toothpick spikes. I trim down said toothpicks and insert them into their allocated holes. And then we are onto the legs that are no longer present. I've got a couple of greeblies left over which I'll repurpose as the hips. I'll use these to size the legs, which I'll build up with progressively smaller panels. I'll then add a couple of spreaders to the inside of the panels where I plan on inserting dangling wires, which I'll make with a clay extruder. The clay here is Sculpey Souffle, and I'm using this for the wires because it's a bit more rubbery when it's baked and less inclined to break when bent. I can bake this leg, make a second, and mount them on a timber dowel, which I'll fit through a preformed hole in the body. And if you notice that the body is a little less developed than it was 5 minutes ago, then well done. You pat yourself on the back, and you can hit that like button for your attention to detail. I'm proud of you. We will then move on to our second pair of hands, and remember, hands are hard. As this is a big bot bash, I thought it appropriate to make the fingers to resemble beads in honor of Bill. So with a double wound piece of jewelry wire, I add 3 phalanges and make a cute little finger. I make 7 more and sandwich them with some bacon bomb between 2 panels, trim the edges, and bake. For the extra arms, I'll make the forearm in 2 parts. The top forearm to house the retractable claws is simply several layers of clay, stacked and cut to size, which I can add greeblies to. And while I'm doing them, if you want to see what I'm going to be making for Star Wars Day, then stay tuned until the glamour shots and I'll give you a little bit of a preview as to what to expect. And as always, if you are enjoying this video, please like, share, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. Cheers! I can then size the underside of the forearm based off the top forearm, and I will rib that as per the arm legs and hollow out for the aluminium arm armature to fit snugly inside, and then I can bake the lot. Sadly, I included the claws in the bake and they got completely destroyed, so I had to remake the lot. But in good news, the hands look great, so I can drop on a back panel, add some rivets, and I'll glue these into the forearm later. Hello there. I'll drill a little hole into the baked forearm and stick the hand in and add the claws just to give a bit of a form fit, see how it's looking, and I'm pretty chuffed with that. And we can finally move on to the cockpit or head. And I wanted to keep the design of this as simple as I could. So I shaped the head and I sharpened the muzzle. I scored in a couple of eye sockets and I used a soft but firm silicone shaper to add in the mask grills. I thought 3 was an appropriate nod to the Wolverine. With that, I made a template for the iconic cowl wings and I added a little circle on top that I'll put an X into later. I put a plate on top of the head for a little bit of variation, which I'll stick down with some bacon bond. And once that's in place, I use a blade to sharpen up the beak, and with some nice sharp edges we can put that in the oven and we can move on to our assembly line. Now, as we have previously discussed, this bot has seen his fair share of scraps, and to that end we need to take our fresh off the assembly line clean boy and rough him up something good and proper. So I can start with a blade, taking chips and chunks out at random, and I can also use a series of metal files to widen the scratches and a handheld drill bit, several of them, to give him some heavy impact damage. I nicked up the claws, and this was by far my favourite part, but truth be told, I have thus far broken 4 of the 6 claws and had to glue them back in place. Now we can sit back and enjoy the assembly process. With Weapon X fully assembled, I'll add a little bit more battle damage throughout the body, including another homage of 3 claw marks across his helmet. Fun as this part is, it's also a little scary because it's like frying an egg. You cannot go back. You scratch it, you're in. And with all that damage done to this poor old fella, I think it's time that we can call this model good and move ourselves onto some painting.
Do ba 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 do do ba.
Let it be known that this is the moment I gave up on my cheap airbrush. I threw it straight in the bin and I went out and I bought 2 rattle cans, one of which I only needed because I tried a zenithal highlight. It did not work, I didn't need it, so I ended up priming the whole thing white because I needed the lighter base for the silvers and the yellows. But enough about all of my airbrush woes. I think in honor of Bill making stuff, I'll tell you a little story about this bot instead of trying to talk you through my mediocre attempts at painting. You can always go to Squidwire if you want to know how to paint. In the year 2030, the Earth was set upon by ravenous creatures. They came from the sky, from the sea, and from deep within the mountains, and their appetite was insatiable. They first attacked the coasts of the larger landmasses. Russia, China, America, and mainland Europe first attacked whilst children slept. The monsters knew when we sleep. They seemed to have knowledge of the nations with the strongest military forces and struck them first. The neutral island nations were the last to suffer the fate of the rest of the world. The invaders left them as fodder, snacks, like dolls to play with no defenses. But the world fought back. In the war that followed, we created a way to level the playing field, an answer to the rivers of blood and tears. 20th century cartoon-themed mechs. This particular Wolverine Mech, or Weapon X, was piloted by a man named Keith. That's right, Keith. Alone, on the beaches of Wicklow, Keith fought the enemy in the rain. He became overwhelmed by the masses approaching from the channel. Strategically, they swarmed him like bees overwhelming a hornet by sheer numbers. Weapon X was torn apart from the waist down. His legs ripped clean off by the creature's vice-like but serrated jaws. Left for dead, with a mech that couldn't stand, Keith was stranded, alone, helpless. He lay inside for what seemed like an eternity, listening to the bug-like creature's limbs scratch what he thought to be his metal tomb. And when all fell silent, Keith left the relative safety of his vessel and searched for a way to survive. After scouring the shores for days, our seemingly doomed hero sourced enough batteries to partially charge Weapon X's core. Enough to maybe escape to a holding post in Wrexham across the channel. But if a fight was met en route, he would not be so lucky to survive a second onslaught. But without legs, how to escape? Luckily this mech was designed with 4 arms. 2 powerful limbs with massive claws to overwhelm the enemy with brute strength, and 2 swifter arms above, armed with 3 5-meter-long retractable claws on each forearm to eviscerate the horde. Weapon X did escape that day, and he and Keith became one. He walked away, on his arms, defied the icy clutches of death and survived. And he fights to this day. He fights as a legend. He fights on the front line. He doesn't fight for glory. He doesn't fight for vengeance. He doesn't fight for freedom or even because he has to. He fights because he gets to. It's a privilege. He's tasted the rain so that he can smell the flowers. But he knows. He'll die inside this bot. He'll die fighting. And that concludes story time. Now, where are we? Oh, doing a little bit of dry brushing, I see. Very good, very good. Get the toes. Nice, nice. Yep, a little bit in there. A little bit there. And go back to the toes. Yep, very good, very good. Okay, what else do we have? Just to give a quick summary on the paint job, you probably saw somewhere along the lines that I got a wet palette for the first time, so I tried that out and got to practice, obviously. I've only ever used a little bit of the fabric in the lunchbox, and the rust was a lot of fun. Damage, awful lot of fun. And the dry brushing, well, I think everybody knows that's pretty cool. And yeah, I'm absolutely chuffed with how he's looking, stoked. To give it a little bit of scale, I've got this little man here that I'm going to put in blue jeans and a brown jacket. Nothing to do with my dress sense, but hey, it'll let us know how big the bot is and we can move on to a base. For the base, I'll be using some XPS foam that I got off Amazon, and I can position our Weapon X where I want him to go and draw a little squiggle down the middle, which will be a later road. I'll mark that out with a marker, and I want it to be green on either side as if all the battles are taking place in the fields, not the cities. And I can cut that down to size and then hack away at the edges to give it a more natural feel. And to make it even more natural, I'll scoop out the road so it's got a little bit of a divot, and then fire. Because natural selection is actually a real thing, I'll take this outside and give it a little melt out there. I'll then coat it with some Mod Podge with some white acrylic paint and fill in the road with some multi-purpose hole filler. I'll smooth in the hole filler with a gloved hand, and then I'll use a little rock to impress in a little bit of texture to give it a more natural feel. I did make the tiniest, cutest little wheel, and I'll put that on a paintbrush and I'll roll it down the middle of the filler while it's still wet so that it'll leave me some nice track marks. Thank God I'm not too concerned about how brown or what shade of brown the base color is, because I think we can all agree that that is the worst colored poo brown that has ever been applied to a diorama base before. But the bad part will be covered in PVA glue and grass, and the middle part is covered in a leather brown and then got dry brushed with a bone white to highlight some of the edges. I dragged a little bit of the PVA glue down onto the path as well, just so it wasn't a clean run through and it looks like a bit of the grass is overgrowing with age, because these creatures have been around for quite a while. We can then paint the edges of the base black and get onto our final assembly. I got a few pine trees that I sourced from the local hobby store. We've obviously got our Weapon X that needs to go in place as our star center. And of course, we need our little pilot. There goes Keith. Massive thank you to everybody who came out to play today and enjoyed this video. Do let me know in the comments section below if you enjoyed this video. If you liked the story, should I tell more stories in the future, or should I just stick to talking about the build? Do you have a favorite mech? Let me know in the comments. Do you have a favorite X-Men? Let me know. Would love to hear from you. And until next time, watch all my other videos and go make a mess. Bye bye.
Do ba 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 do boo do a boo ba do ba do boo boo ba do ba do ba do ba do ba do ba do boo do A boo ba doo ba doo boo.